Welcome back, travelers, to the Planeswalker's Tome, your portal to the realms of Magic the Gathering. Please note, this video is recorded with an organic feel, like being read to by a friend, and thus has been minimally edited. Now let's resume our exploration of The Shattered Alliance by Jeff Grubb. Chapter 11, The Alliance Reforged. History, particularly the popular ones, concentrate on the battles and warriors who win them. Very rarely do they pay attention to what happens thereafter, when the adults show up and the important matters are resolved. Arkle, Argivian Scholar. Pova led Joda into the sweat lodge. Yaya was clad in oversized white robes, likely plundered from Lavisa's private stock. She had a leather thong around her neck, but the talisman it was attached to was buried beneath the folds of a thick cloth blanket. "Hello, you," said Joda, sitting down next to the bed. "Hello yourself," said the task mage. She looked bleary-eyed, but a familiar fire was back in her eyes and a rosy glow was in her cheeks. "I understand I mixed a few things while I was out." "A couple crises, a plague, a trip, a battle," said Joda, lightly. "We found and fought the rebels who were raiding the outpost. It turns out Varchild is alive after all, and she is the rebels' leader." Joda decided to wait for Yaya to ask before providing the whys and where the followers. "I should have figured it out," said Yaya instead. "The Khajidoreans are heavily into charismatic leaders. Which is why you should always find the body before declaring someone dead," said Joda, then added, "In some cases, you should double-check even then." "Bring me up to date then," said the task mage, pulling her covers up. "Tell me what I missed. All of it." Joda did, and in the telling, found himself more relaxed than he had been in days. There's a simplicity in the telling that did not exist when the events were happening around him, and it spun out easily through his own battle with the phantasm and Yaya's initial collapse, to their flight, to the outpost, to the battle and its aftermath. For her part, Yaya was the perfect audience, appreciative and quiet, only breaking in to clarify the occasional point. In telling the tale, Joda felt like a part of himself had been restored. "So Varchild is real. She isn't Lim-Dûl or one of his agents," Yaya said at last. "Not according to the reliquary," said Joda. "Though that doesn't mean others haven't been working through her, or part of her organization. Varchild really believes what she is doing." "The king must be shattered," said Yaya. "All over again." "He's just refusing to feel anything but anger towards the general, I'm afraid," said Joda. "Darian buried Varchild with honor 5 years ago, and grieved deeply for her. As far as he's concerned, the Varchild leading the rebels is another person entirely, a threat to his realm, a threat to be dealt with accordingly." "And Cold Eyes?" prompted Yaya. "Well, she never particularly liked Varchild, but respected her as a warrior. Now that she knows Varchild is behind the rebels, and the raids are not some crown-authorized Khajidorean plot, she's more reasonable and rational, more likely to form a decent plan to respond to Varchild's attack. If anything, she's more serious about it, and she really wants to rally other chieftains against Varchild and work closely with Darian as well." "Nothing unites like a common enemy," said Yaya, and she frowned. "I wonder if that should be on Lim-Dûl's tombstone as well." "I can't think of another things I'd rather see there," said Joda. "But just seeing Lim-Dûl's tombstone would be good enough. We do have one good lead, and that is," said Yaya. "The timing of the phantasm's ambush on me," said Joda rather. "It happened soon after we started rooting through Gustla's equipment." Yaya shook her head, and if trying to dislodge an errant thought. "Are you thinking that Lim-Dûl took possessions of someone important from the last battle?" "I'm not fully certain," said Joda, "but the timing is rather neat. I'd like to visit her tower in Krav. There's something I need there anyway." "And you intend to pursue it, don't you?" said Yaya, raising her right hand to the side of Joda's face and touching his bare skin. Joda pulled back, not out of restraint, but rather as he spied something dark in Yaya's hand. Holding her palm upward, he saw that a broad, dark crescent of blood had been etched into the flesh. Yaya smiled sheepishly. "I think I did something to myself when I was out. Maybe gripped a little too hard." Joda smiled back. "This, at least, I can cure," he said, taking a small, delicate ball of white energy in his mind, and letting it pass through his fingers. Yaya bit her lower lip in anticipation of the pain that would come as her hand glowed in Joda's. When the glow subsided, her hand was smooth again. Nice, she said. I've got some wrinkles around the eyes you can take out. If you want, said Joda. It's a bigger spell. Joke, said Yaya, raising both hands, now unblemished. That was a joke, but you can teach me that one. For later years, of course. Of course, said Joda, behind him. Pova made a harumphing noise. I think what my keepers mean, said Yaya, is that I still have to get some rest. And it's just as well, said Joda. It'll probably take a few days to sort everything out here. We'll probably have to get back to Kajeld anyway. First thing you have to do is to get a protective talisman, said Yaya, raising her hand to the thong around her neck. One that will protect you from plagues as well. After my little experience, I don't want anything to happen to you. Pova followed Joda out of the room. Behind him, Yaya rubbed the fingers of her left hand against the smooth skin of her right palm and smiled a toothy grin. The battle had left the trading post little more than a shell. The stables were a burnt memory, and without Joda's magical walls to support them, the northern entrance was a gaping hole, and the east wall was sagging in on itself. Already working crews from both the victorious armies were shoring things up and repairing what they could. Walking across the parade ground, Joda was pleased to see the Balduvians and Kejodorian troops mixing freely. This was a far cry from 20 years ago when both kept to their own camps and had to be dragged screaming and kicking to fight along each other on the battlefield. One of the survivors of the siege was describing the final day of the battle in all too glowing terms. 2 Kejodorian guards were both trying to impress the same Balduvian women with their civilized sophistication, and a group of merchants from the Grey Fishers clan had already arrived, following the wake of the Blue Storms, making bargain deals of fresh fruit and rough fabrics for finished outfits and salvaged weapons. In contrast, there's a thunder beneath the main dome of the trading post as Pova and Joda entered. Raised voices, crackling with use, rebounded off the curved walls, lending to both volume and false sense of menace. Lavisa and Darian were drinking ale and letting the next generation fuss about the aftermath of the battle. Both Elisandrite and Lothar cut off their heated discussion when Joda entered. Careful negotiations, I see, Joda, taking his position with the elders. Probably well-reasoned and insightful. We're letting the children argue, said Lavisa, drinking horn in her hand, to see if they do any better than we did. We did our part years ago, said Darian. We just did not pursue things, thinking that the natural course of events would work out well. He just gripped an oversized golden mug, another treasure from somewhere in Cold Ice's hoard. They do, but sometimes you have to give them the natural course of events a swift kick, said Joda. How is the small task mage, asked the king, more relaxed than Joda had ever seen him, either in Krav or in Kajeld. Feisty enough to take a swing at anyone who calls her small, said Joda, bringing smiles all around. Before the battle here resumes, I have a boon to ask of you, your majesty. You managed to keep my headstrong daughter in one piece, Archmage, said Darian. I am positively dispossessed. What do you ask? Permission to enter Gustla's tower in Krav, said Joda. I believe the device I need is still there. Darian looked at his daughter. Alexandrite smiled primly and said, I believe the control word flow spells are the same as the ones on your own material you worked on earlier. She was very proper now. It seemed to Joda less enthusiastic to volunteer information to the great Archmage. Joda approved of the girl's maturity, but wondered idly what had happened while she was away. Then I have your permission, said Joda. You have my blessing, said the king, on condition that any of the other old books you find there are sent to Kajeld straight away. Thank you, said Joda. So what is the nature of the current disturbance? Border, said Lavisa. Migrating population, said Darian. Refugees, said Lothar. Potential immigrants, corrected Alexandrite. The fact is that much of the coastline, prime farmland, has been eradicated by the rising tides. Kalinsko has been lost, and Krav itself may fall to the sea. At the same time, the retreating glaciers has opened up new irritable lands in the Balduvian territories. Nation, corrected Lothar. We are as sovereign a nation as yourselves. Territory creates illusion of a junior status. We may be a disparate people, under many local rulers, but a people nonetheless. Agreed, said Darian. Already food is being sent to support Kajeld's northern cities. That can be increased if we settle displaced populations north. Into our land, said Lothar. which you can't use all of it or protect against Varchild's rebels, said Alexandrite. And what you get for all these new people coming northward, asked Lothar. Alexandrite tapped the mat. In the short terms, more protection against Varchild, as well as kicking one of the supports of her people out from under her. If people have land to farm, there's less of a chance they'll want anybody to steal it, Keshadorian or otherwise. Additionally, there will be weapons and armors, as well as Keshadorian military units, under Balduvian's command, said Lothar. If you wish, said Alexandrite. In the wrong one, you get the craftsmen and merchants, and masons to build cities, and the ability to forge your own weapons and fashion your own clothes. Levisa said, Have I mentioned the clear reasoning of your daughter, King? Few seem to be able to answer all his questions, much less make a dent in his opinions. Darian chuckled and responded, Have I mentioned the bravery of your son? Not many in court stand up to my little girl like that. Both are good traits in the grandchildren. Both young people reeled back in disgust. Mother, said Lothar, scowling and blushed. Don't even consider it, father, said Alexandrite. Her cheeks suddenly flushed pink. The king of Keshador held up his hands, and wide eyes to mock surprise. The Balduvian chieftain laughed and said, We're just noting your good qualities, and congratulating ourselves on having contributed them to you. It sounds like a good deal for all involved, said Joda, leaning over the table in the center of the room. There were the old map of two nations, with the original coastline spread out on the oak surface. Already someone had roughed in the present coastlines, and another hand, probably Lothar's, had sketched the retreat of the glaciers. Vast territories were opening to the north, new land for both peoples. The map had a number of lines sketched and erased, and a lump of rubber sat to one side with peels of dirty paper stuck to it. Someone had drawn a straight line cutting the map in half, but that was erased. Another plan was to create huge bulges around the trading post, and another Keshadorian outpost at each, one called Darian's Roost. A third was to settle the Keshadorians around the coastline, and a fourth was to create a commonly held region between the two nations, made up equally parts of both. The problem is, any divided line creates a potential battle line, said Lothar. Just as some of your people want to keep their old ways, so do some of ours. The miss they fleeing Aurochs, and aren't comfortable with the merchants suddenly flaunting their wealth. That sounds familiar, said King Darian. Agreed, says Alexandrite. So how to draw the border, said Lisa, to benefit all? Then the answer should be this, said Joda, grasping the ball of rubber and quickly rubbing it against the map. Lothar looked at the new map and said, So you just got rid of the lines we put there? No lines, said Alexandrite, catching on a bit faster. No borders? A unified set of kingdoms, said Joda. Combined kingdoms. You have more in common now than you had 20 years ago, and have a need to cooperate. You have a common enemy in Varchild's rebels, and Trestlehorn at Levisa. That is another unsolved foe. Darian nodded as well. And our local chieftains, said Lothar sternly. Alexandrite smiled and said, Ennobled, just as Keshadorian heroes would be. Your Balduvian lords wouldn't have to fight to maintain their positions, and rulership could pass through either male or female lines, according to your local tradition. Levisa templed her fingers in front of her. That's a bit of civilization I could grow to like, now that I'm getting longer in the tooth and more achy in the joints. She smiled warmly. The unified kingdoms of Balduvia and Keshador, said Lothar, and nodded. Allied kingdoms, corrected Alexandrite, of Keshador and Balduvia. Choose either of those, said Joda, and one side perceives itself superior. You have a suggestion, said Darian? I know you suggest Joda's land, said Levisa, still smiling, or Jodastan, or Jordania. Darian chuckled. There are nations here before the coming of the ice, said Joda. One of the few to survive has been Latnam, and we have kept the oldest maps, the ones that go back to the time of the brothers and before. When we started counting time, both these lands carried different names. They called it Argive. There was silence around the room at various participants, rolling the name around their tongues. Unified Argive, said Lothar. Allied Argive, corrected Alexandrite. It's an old name, said Darian, and old names hold power. But it's a new thing, neither Keshadorian or Balduvian, said Cold Eyes. Combined, but neither side greater. A new Argive. There were thin, well-considered smiles all around, and Joda looked around the table. Lothar and Alexandrite were already debating the matters of government. appointing council in the Khajdorian fashion, versus clan election as the Beduvians rule themselves. The two parents were watching the youngsters, conferring between themselves on different matters. Joda wondered how long before the young people realized their own parents' plotting. It would matter little in the long run. Though the Archmage for the unifying forces operating outside the doomed room, the basics of trade and a common foe would put them on the same side. And this time, the graft unifying the two people would take. It took Joda a while to notice Pova standing beside him, her face creep as a deep frowned. The Archmage wondered how the traditionalists on both sides, the shamans of the north and the merchants of the south, would reconcile the nations merging. What did the new world they were conceiving of mean to an old woman like her? Then he realized Pova was not staring at the map with her sourward look, but at Joda himself. Deep within the clean, pristine walls of Soldev, the Hierophant of the Adonites pressed his forehead against the cold stone. Before him, the flaming tower with Lim-Dûl's voice spoke ready. "Are you ready?" it said. "We are nearly prepared," said the Hierophant, who had kept himself within shouting distance of the flame for the past week. "The sacrifice will be made, and the awakening will come." "Excellent," said the flaming voice. "Then it is time to reel in our catch. I need a toy from you. One of the metal sentries from Dagson's vault. One of the little ones." The Hierophant opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. "As it is your will, it shall be my quest," he managed to add. "Should I bring it here?" "No," said the flickering voice. "I will send it as a gift to our dear Archmage. We will send it to Krav." The voice of Lim-Dûl barked out a few more orders, to which the Adonite Hierophant meekly acquiesced. Then the flickering voice was gone, suddenly, almost cut off mid-word without a final warning of benediction or threat. The Hierophant remained on his knees for another minute, blinking into a fire, wondering if his horrible and great master would return in a matter of moments. Slowly, the Hierophant pulled himself to his feet and stumbled out of the audience hall. The priest took the stairway down into the great vaults that they had found beneath the city itself. The legacy of the machine gods reveled in their faithful followers, the beasts of war. There were 8 of them, and the Hierophant had hoped that they would have found a full 9, a pregnant mystic number, before to be awakened. But events were not to be, and these 8 would be sufficient. They resembled nothing so much as great metallic whales, comically balancing on their front fins, their tails held aloft. They were life-size in forms of metal, smoky in parts from long-ago battles. Where the fins would have been in the real whale, there were instead wide feet, splayed and surefoot, made of sturdy beams with massive joints, which held each great body aloft. The beasts had seemed blind to the Hierophant at first, but now the man was sure they could sense more than he could. The Hierophant placed a pale, 3-fingered hand against the blackened side of the beast, and could feel a deep pulsing within its heart. Soon the sacrifice were alive. Soon the blood would be spilt. Soon they would return to life. The Hierophant leaned his face against the side of the great war beast, his piercings clanging against its metal skin. He whispered softly, "Soon," and it was sure the beast understood him, tensing itself for the day to come. This concludes Chapter 11 of our saga. If you enjoyed the tale so far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell to be alerted when the next chapter airs. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, may your adventures be as boundless as the plains themselves. Thank you for listening.